What if I told you that the latest battleground for global self-reliance isn't microchips or artificial intelligence or jet engines, but puppies?
Right. Very fierce, highly trained puppies.
Exactly. Welcome to today's deep dive. We are jumping into this really incredible stack of sources today. It is anchored by an April 2026 article from The Economist called China Off the Leash, and we've also got a really comprehensive background data pack to go with it.
It is quite the read.
Yeah, it really is. And our mission today is to unpack how China's push for global self-sufficiency has, well, unexpectedly gone biological, specifically through this homegrown police dog, the Kunming. And just as a quick heads up for you listening, we're going to be navigating some pretty heavy geopolitical and nationalistic strategies today.
Yeah, and I think it's important to state up front that we are absolutely not here to take political sides left or right. We are just impartially decoding the mechanics of this policy shift.
Right.
We want to help you understand the fascinating subtext of what is actually going on here without endorsing any specific political viewpoint.
Exactly. We are just looking at the blueprints. So let's unpack this. We usually think of tech independence as, building your own silicon wafer factories or writing your own operating systems.
Sure.
But banning foreign dogs sounds, almost absurd at first glance. To understand why this is such a massive shift, we really need to start with the historical baseline. Like, where do standard police dogs usually come from?
Well, if you look at police departments around the world, whether you are in New York, Tokyo, or historically Beijing, almost all standard working dog breeds trace their lineage back to Northern Europe.
Okay, so we're talking about breeds like the German Shepherd.
Exactly. German Shepherds, the Belgian Malinois, the Dutch Shepherd. That dominance is basically the result of centuries of European pastoral traditions colliding with, modern standardized beliefing needs.
Right.
Back in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, European breeders focused really heavily on standardizing traits. They wanted obedience, bite inhibition, scent tracking. And by doing that, they established the international gold standard. For a really long time, if a country wanted a reliable canine unit, they simply imported those European breeds.
But China, however, has actually been quietly working on an alternative for a very long time. The sources point out that this domestic transition, it didn't just happen overnight.
No, not at all.
It actually traces back to the 1950s. Officials in the southwestern city of Kunming started this specialized breeding experiment. They began crossing traditional German Shepherds with local wolf dog hybrids.
And the geography of where they chose to do this is just crucial to understanding the kind of animal they ultimately created.
How so?
Well, Kunming is the capital of Yunnan province. It sits at an elevation of over 6,000 feet, and it's surrounded by just incredibly complex terrain.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you have the foothills of the Himalayas to the northwest, and then these tropical environments to the south. So the officials weren't just breeding for standard obedience.
Right, they needed more than that.
Exactly. They were specifically trying to engineer environmental resilience into the canine bloodline. They needed an animal that could operate in extreme conditions that might, honestly, just exhaust a standard European breed.
Simply put, it's like they custom-built an all-terrain vehicle.
That is a perfect way to put it.
Because the stats the Chinese police claim for the modern Kunming dog are wild. Apparently, they can cope with the freezing high altitudes of the Tibetan Plateau just as easily as the suffocating tropical heat of the southern provinces.
Right, it's a huge operational range.
And they also claim the Kunming has a sharper nose than traditional European police dogs.
We should probably add a quick caveat there, though.
Oh, sure.
The data highlighting that superior olfactory sense, that actually comes from domestic experiments conducted by the breeders themselves.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, as of right now, that specific metric hasn't been verified by independent international canine organizations.
Got it. But still, the domestic confidence in the breed's physical capabilities is absolute. Decades of refining those wolf dog traits have led to this massive operation. There are nearly 1,000 Kunming pups born every single year.
It is a massive scale.
But here is where it gets really interesting. And honestly, this is the part of the data pack that totally made me stop in my tracks.
Biotechnology aspect.
Yes. They didn't just stop at traditional breeding. In 2011, officials set up a dedicated gene bank specifically to protect Kunming DNA. And then, by 2018, they successfully cloned their first Kunming dog.
Yeah, they did.
Wait, cloning. Just to be absolutely clear, they aren't just selectively breeding the best dogs together. They are making one-to-one genetic copies in a lab. That sounds massively expensive for a police department.
No, it is incredibly expensive. And it requires a staggering amount of highly specialized biotechnology infrastructure.
I can imagine.
Cloning a dog is notoriously difficult. The canine reproductive system is highly complex compared to other mammals. That's why the first successful dog clone in the world didn't even happen until 2005 in South Korea.
Wow, so it's a relatively recent science.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So to pull this off, the state essentially took an exceptional, highly decorated police dog, extracted its somatic cells, and used nuclear transfer technology to create an exact genetic replica.
Unbelievable.
They wanted to ensure that its specific operational traits, its prey drive, its scent capabilities, its stamina lived on perfectly without dealing with the genetic lottery of normal reproduction.
Because nothing says, we love this employee, like literally duplicating them.
Right. It's a surreal concept, definitely. But it points to a very serious classification shift.
What do you mean?
Well, by establishing a gene bank and a state-funded cloning program, the coming dog is no longer just an animal. It has been elevated to the status of a strategic biological national asset.
Wow.
It is essentially intellectual property with a heartbeat.
Intellectual property with a heartbeat. That is wild. And, if it is treated like a piece of high-tech IP, that naturally forces us to ask, why does a country need to be technologically self-sufficient in dogs?
Right.
It makes total sense to want to manufacture your own microchips or pharmaceuticals to protect your economy, but replacing law enforcement canines brings us from biology straight into national strategy. So what does this all mean when we look at the actual language the Public Security Ministry used?
The phrasing in the official documents from late 2025 and early 2026 is highly revealing. The ministry doesn't just praise the dog's stamina or its sense of smell.
What do they say?
They specifically describe the coming dogs as an important, independently controlled advantage.
Independently controlled.
Exactly. They frame the breeding program entirely within the context of fierce global competition. That phrase, independently controlled, is the connective tissue linking this mandate to China's broader macroeconomic policies. It's the exact same language they use for import substitution.
Okay, could you break down import substitution for us? Just give us the explain it like I'm five version of how that concept applies here.
Sure. Simply put, import substitution is a national strategy where a country decides to stop buying a specific, essential item from foreign countries.
Okay.
And instead, they figure out how to build it entirely at home.
Yeah.
Imagine you rely on a specific cafe for your morning coffee.
Right.
But you are worried they might suddenly cut you off or, double their prices.
Yeah.
Import substitution is basically buying your own espresso machine and roasting your own beans so you are completely immune to whatever that cafe does.
That makes total sense.
And China has spent years aggressively applying this to their economy. They want to replace American soybeans with domestic crops to ensure food security. They want to build their own jet engines so they aren't reliant on Western aerospace companies.
Right. The core logic is that relying on foreign imports creates a fatal security vulnerability.
Precisely.
I know what you mean, but looking at it from another angle,
Yeah.
no one is going to embargo a dog. Is this really about national security? I mean, I can easily see a foreign government blocking the sale of semiconductor manufacturing equipment to kneecap a tech sector. But is anyone realistically going to threaten a superpower's national security by withholding shipments of German Shepherd puppies?
You're hitting on the exact paradox of this policy. A dog embargo isn't a realistic geopolitical threat.
Right.
Grains, microchips, energy infrastructure, those have actual critical supply chain vulnerabilities that can cripple a nation in days. But a police dog sits in a really fascinating gray area.
How so?
It is an asset that is real enough to be operationally useful, but controllable enough to monopolize. Banning foreign dogs isn't really about plugging a literal existential security hole.
Oh, so it's about the messaging.
Exactly. It is about extending the narrative of self-sufficiency into every possible corner of state operations.
I see.
When a government makes autonomous control the central defining pillar of its national identity, it cannot stop at high-tech. It has to trickle down to everything visible to the public.
Right, the optics of it.
Yeah. If a state can demonstrate that it doesn't even need the outside world for its working animals, it reinforces this aura of total, impenetrable self-reliance. It sends a message that the state ecosystem is complete and absolute.
Once you realize this is driven by messaging, you kind of have to look at the actual story this dog is telling the Chinese public.
Oh, absolutely.
Because this domestic narrative is being broadcast very loudly. Let's dig into the cultural repackaging of the Kunming dog. There is a quote in the data pack from the breeders that perfectly captures this. They describe the Kunming dog as possessing an Eastern temperament.
That phrase carries a lot of weight. How do the breeders specifically define that temperament in the sources?
Well, they define it as reserved yet intimidating when needed. Basically, this means they bred the canine equivalent of a stoic bouncer.
A stoic bouncer. That description, reserved but intimidating, isn't just a biological behavioral trait.
What is it then?
It is the projection of a specific political aesthetic. It aligns perfectly with how the state wants to be perceived by its citizens. Capable, highly disciplined, and formidable when challenged. Unspoken political authority.
It really represents a massive cultural rebrand, especially when you look at it historically. If you ask someone 30 or 40 years ago to name a famous Chinese dog breed, they would likely name the Pekingese or the Shih Tzu.
Right, the traditional lap dogs of the ancient imperial courts.
Exactly. And think about what those toy dogs symbolize. They are aristocratic, delicate, and, completely harmless.
Very true.
They represent this ancient, refined, heavily stylized culture that you just admire behind glass. The message of a Pekingese is luxury and antiquity. But the Kunming dog represents a total whiplash-inducing pivot. It's modern, it's industrial, it's biologically engineered, and honestly, it's slightly terrifying.
It really is. The transition from the delicate Shih Tzu to the cloned, fire-jumping Kunming wolf dog is a literal living embodiment of China's shifting global brand.
A shift in how they want the world to see them.
Exactly. The country has spent the last few decades aggressively moving its image away from just being an ancient civilization known for its history toward being a modern power, defined by its technological might, its discipline, and its overall capability.
And once a nation successfully rebrands its own domestic security with this fierce modern asset, this next logical step for a superpower isn't to hide it, it's to export it. Which brings us to foreign policy. The sources reveal that Kunming dogs are now actively being given as gifts to police forces in neighboring countries. Specifically, the data highlights exports to North Korea and Pakistan.
Which represents a fascinating evolution of a very old, very famous diplomatic tool.
Oh.
Think about it. When most of us hear about China giving animals as gifts to foreign nations, our minds immediately go to one specific creature.
The panda. Classic panda diplomacy.
Exactly. For decades, panda diplomacy has been the undisputed cornerstone of China's soft power. Let's look at why the panda works so well.
Okay.
Pandas are universally loved because they are cute, they are rare, and they are completely harmless. They look like living, breathing teddy bears.
They really do.
So when China loans a panda to a foreign zoo, it builds pure, unadulterated emotional connection with the public of that receiving country. It generates immense organic goodwill and positive headlines.
It's pure charm. But the Kunming dog sends a totally different message. I mean, you do not give a foreign police force a cloned, highly aggressive wolf dog to make the local citizens say, "Aww."
Definitely not. You do it to showcase industrial and operational superiority.
Right.
Gifting a Kunming dog tells the receiving country, we don't just manufacture solar panels and build high-speed rail. Our biotechnology and our law enforcement training regimens are so advanced that we are literally breeding superior security assets.
Wow.
It's a demonstration of hard competence, not soft cuteness. It commands respect rather than affection.
But there has to be a catch, right? I mean, if you're a neighboring country like Pakistan and you accept these highly trained dogs, you don't just take the leash, say thank you, and walk away.
Oh, absolutely not.
You have to know how to handle them. Basically, it's like giving someone a free printer. Eventually, they are locked into buying your specific ink and maintenance ecosystem. How exactly does that ecosystem work with a live animal?
That printer analogy perfectly captures the underlying mechanism. A working police dog isn't just a standalone product you can unbox and use. It requires an entire, deeply integrated ecosystem.
What does that entail?
Well, when a police force adopts a Kunming dog, they have to communicate with it. Dogs are trained to respond to specific phonetics and tonal commands. If the dog is trained in Chinese commands, the foreign handlers must learn to use those commands.
That makes sense.
But beyond language, they are importing Chinese handling protocols, tactical deployment doctrines, and even specialized veterinary care standards.
Oh, wow. So they might even have to send their own handlers to Kunming to learn the system, or bring Chinese instructors into their own academies.
Exactly. And over time, that creates a deep structural interoperability between the law enforcement agencies of those two countries.
Right. It aligns their standard operating procedures.
Yes. What starts as a bilateral gift of a puppy quietly evolves into aligning international security protocols. That is a completely different, much more pragmatic level of soft power than a panda chewing bamboo in a zoo enclosure.
It really is.
It builds strategic reliance under the guise of mutual cooperation. If China can convince neighboring countries to standardize their canine units around the Kunming dog instead of the traditional German Shepherd, they have successfully exported their own model of self-sufficiency.
Right. They're slowly eroding that Northern European monopoly we talked about at the very beginning of the show.
Precisely.
It really is wild when you step back and look at the cascading effect of this single policy. I mean, we started this deep dive looking at a bureaucratic mandate to swap out some dogs at local police stations.
Yeah.
And by digging into the mechanisms, we ended up unpacking genetic engineering, macroeconomic import substitution, domestic propaganda, and international security alignment.
It highlights how deeply interconnected statecraft really is, and how a single biological asset can carry the weight of multiple geopolitical strategies simultaneously.
And it really brings it all back to you, the listener. Why should you care about the breeding programs of Chinese police dogs? You might not work in law enforcement, you might not live anywhere near Asia,
Right.
but you should care because this story perfectly illustrates how totalizing a national narrative can become once it takes root. When a grand macro concept like self-sufficiency truly captures a government's imagination, it doesn't just stay in the halls of parliament or in the high-tech sector.
It trickles all the way down.
Exactly. It influences the global supply chains, it dictates the media you consume, and yes, it even determines the DNA of the dog on the end of a police officer's leash. It proves that in modern geopolitics, absolutely nothing is too small or too biological to be politicized and weaponized.
It forces us to fundamentally redefine our assumptions about how nations influence one another.
Definitely.
If the ultimate tool of international soft power is deliberately shifting away from the harmless and cute like the panda toward the capable and intimidating like a cloned wolf dog, what does that mean for how superpowers will try to win our hearts and minds in the future? Are we entering a new era where even soft power is starting to show its teeth?
That is a fascinating and honestly slightly chilling thought to chew on. Thank you for joining us on this journey today. Keep questioning the narrative, keep looking for the hidden mechanics behind the headlines, and as always, keep diving deep. Catch you next time.